So why I mention all these different hormones is because this happened to me. I thought I had a thyroid issue because all my blood work came back with my thyroid not looking great. And even though I took the thyroid medication, I was still having trouble feeling good. So my whole hormonal system was dysregulated through stress, and my thyroid was starting to shut down.
Are you ready to transform your health journey? Welcome to the Holistish Podcast, where science meets holistic wellness to help you take control of your health. I'm Lianne Balazsi, an osteopath with a background in psychology, athletic therapy, and occupational therapy, here to guide you through practical ways to feel your best without relying solely on doctor visits or prescriptions. Join me each week for deep dives, expert insights, and real-life wellness experiments as we explore the powerful connection between body and mind. Whether you're new to holistic health or just looking for fresh perspectives, you're in the right place. Let's start unlocking your healthiest, happiest self together. This is the Holistish Podcast. Before we dive in, a quick reminder. I'm an osteopath, not a medical doctor, and this podcast is for informational purposes only. The content shared here is based on my personal experience and education in health and holistic wellness. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have about your own particular situation and your health. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, let's get on with the show.
Welcome back, everybody. Last week, we were talking a lot about stress and the mechanisms of how we activate the fight or flight response in the nervous system. So in other words, activating the sympathetic nervous system. And I wanted to go into more how chronic stress takes place and what happens to your hormones once you have chronic stress living in your body. Because in this day and age, we hear about so many different people online talking about hormonal balance. I was talking about this a bit last time. I don't know if this is just me because my feed on my Instagram is really catered to health. So I feel like I get all the health influencers, and the hot topic right now really is hormonal imbalance. And I wanted to just give a bit more clarity about what that means, because there are a lot of hormones in the body, and hormonal imbalance can mean different things for different people. So when people just jump to using that general term, I find it very general. So I wanted to clarify at least more in my wheelhouse of what I mean when I say hormonal imbalance. Me, it's referring more to when someone's exposed to too much chronic stress and how that can create problems down the line. So last week we talked about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, and how when the sympathetic nervous system is really activated, it increases blood flow to the muscles, it can create tension in your body, and it can create the fight or flight response. So all that is a very short-lived mechanism. So this is when the nervous system ends up triggering almost instantaneously down to our adrenal glands. It triggers the adrenal glands, especially in the center of the adrenal gland. It has a cortex, so it has a nice little, I like to visualize it as a little crust, and then you have the meat in the middle, the medulla. And the medulla is where it produces adrenaline. So when adrenaline is running in your system, that's what makes all the increased heart rate. It increases blood flow to your muscles. It dilates your airways to get more oxygen flowing so that you can be ready to either run away or defend yourself in a fight. And it really enhances your alertness and your reaction time. It can actually also, one cool thing about adrenaline is it will actually lower your pain sensations. So you may have seen it either on, if ever you watched shows like, say, Grey's Anatomy or ER. There's a lot of other medical shows now. I don't watch them, but they'll show patients who come in after a big traumatic effect and they look like they have absolutely nothing wrong with them. So they forget to test, and then all of a sudden they start crashing, right? And after an hour or two, and they end up in a medical disaster because they may be internally bleeding. But the reason that happens it is often the case in these stories is they had so much adrenaline pumping in them. And while the adrenaline was still in their system, they weren't feeling as much of the pain from the trauma. And as the adrenaline leaves, all of a sudden, all the symptoms start piling on. And then lo and behold, we find out they have internal bleeding or what have you. A bit of a drastic example, but it's the first one that comes to mind when you're trying to really explain that effect of adrenaline on your pain sensation. So I can even vouch for that when I used to be a more hardcore athlete playing a lot of sports. And during a game, I could get a bad bruise or a hit of some sort. And I would just get up right away and continue playing because I'd be so primed and ready to play. But then it would be an hour or two after I get home, and all of a sudden, like, these bruises would start popping up. I couldn't walk the next day. I had adrenaline to thank for that. So that's all in the quick system of when you have a high stress response. When you get exposed to a big stressor, this alert system comes on almost instantaneously and gets you ready and primed to go. This is very instinctual. This is probably from when we were back in the prehistoric phases. It helped us survive. It helped our species survive. But in this day and age, we've become more complex beings. And now what happens is we don't just go to this, oh, I've been chased by a predator or big threat of some sort. And then once that threat is gone, we go back to automatically chill mode or the parasympathetic response and rest and digest and relax. We tend to hold on to these stressors longer. In this day and age, there's so much chronic stress out there related to work, performance. A lot of people get attached to perfectionism, and that can lead into a stress state. A lot of people worry about how they're perceived by others. So there's always this low grade level of stress of how am I being perceived? So once we get this prolonged sense of stress within us, no matter what the source is, we don't really care at this point. We end up going into, the adrenaline might start the process, but it leaves pretty quickly. Adrenaline effect is pretty immediate effect, but it's short-lived. Once a stressor lasts more than a few minutes, that's when cortisol starts kicking in. Cortisol is from a different pathway than in the sympathetic nervous system. Cortisol comes through the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis. It's a mouthful. I get it. HPA axis. So this actually takes a bit slower time than the sympathetic nervous system because we're getting the blood flow involved. So the signal comes from the brain, but then from the brain, the signal goes out through the pituitary, and the pituitary secretes hormones that then go and activate the adrenal cortex. So before I talked about the adrenal medulla, where adrenaline comes from, the cortex is the, I like to say, the crust on the outside. And through those cells on the cortex, that releases the cortisol. And the cortisol, it really reaches its peak 20 to 30 minutes after a stressor is involved. So once there's once the stressor has kicked in and it's hanging around a bit longer and there's a prolonged stress that's present, cortisol is going to be the one running the show after that time. It's going to help you sustain your energy by releasing more blood glucose into your system. So to keep, say, the muscles more activated, keep you alert, but we're running more on having just more blood sugar in your system. And it's also helping you with adaptation to this stress because it's realizing, your body's realizing, oh, this isn't just a peak increase in stress and then we're good. It's realizing, oh, we're in this for a while. So it's going to help you maintain your body to be still somewhat functioning despite the stressor. The main effects that cortisol are going to do is it's going to up your metabolism a bit to help keep you moving. And then it's also going to suppress things that are still important in life, but in a stress state, the body really starts to pick and choose what's really essential in that moment. So cortisol will choose to suppress your immune system. So if there's any viruses you've been fighting, and you get into a high stress state, chances are you might get hit with a cold. So anytime you've lived through a bit of a stress in life and then you get sick, chances are that's because your cortisol was suppressing your immune system somewhat. It also suppresses your digestion. So I think I'd mentioned this last time where if you get into a chronic constipation and you've also been living through a lot of stress, you can have cortisol to blame for that. And just the stress loop in general, where you have rest and digest that has been turned off. So when the sympathetic is running, the parasympathetic shuts off. And also cortisol also suppresses your effective digestion. When you look at adrenaline and cortisol together, just to understand that they may do similar things, adrenaline is really like the emergency alarm. It's getting you ready to react to the stressor, whereas cortisol is like your crisis manager. It's making sure your body has enough energy to handle the prolonged stress when it's not leaving fast enough. So when we get into the chronic stages of cortisol, we have too much cortisol in our system. That's where we start to get into a riskier phase where there could be more extreme fatigue, health issues, getting sick more often, and possibly also burnout. So let's scale it back for a minute, and we're going to go over the 3 phases of just when it's short-term to long-term stress that's in your body. So when you get an immediate stressor from seconds to minutes, that's when really adrenaline dominates. So the sympathetic nervous system gets activated, and it starts releasing adrenaline to help support for a fight or flight response. So that's when we were saying the muscles are more activated, your pupils are dilated, you are just primed to defend yourself or to run away. Once the stressor is gone, especially in that short time frame, adrenaline clears out pretty quickly. Once stress gets more prolonged, so this is when we're going from minutes to hours. So you could be in the middle of a more intense situation that's going to be a long time. So for example, you have a stressful interview, or say me back in university, if I had to do an oral presentation.
Quick pause for a second. I just wanted to take a moment to say if this material is resonating with you, I would love for you to come and join my free community over on School. That's skool.com. The group I have is called Ask the Osteopath, and we talk about all different types of topics around your health and well-being. Yes, there's foundations in osteopathy, but we keep it to a broader range all around holistic health and wellness in order to optimize your everyday well-being. So if this sounds like a place you'd like to be, I invite you to go to school.com/osteo. And now, back to the episode.
By the way, that girl couldn't believe that I'm doing a podcast now because public speaking used to terrify me. So those kinds of minutes to hours stressors, cortisol takes over. So you have that HPA axis that leads to a gradual rise in cortisol. And then it helps maintain your energy by increasing your blood sugar. And it suppresses, like we were saying, the non-essential functions. Still very important functions, but for in this moment when there's a stress, your body goes to suppress your digestion and your immune function in order to keep your body in high alert mode. So once we get into chronic stress, so this could be days to months. So this is, say, me back in the university days when it got to exam period. I was always a very stressed out exam taker. So that's when you go into cortisol overload. So when the stress doesn't stop and cortisol remains elevated for too long, this can lead to things like fatigue and burnout, suppressed immune function, like I said. Then we're getting into more blood sugar imbalances and more sleep disturbances. So what does all this mean? And why do we care? It's because at the end of the day, cortisol isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's more when we don't know how to get out of always being stressed, that over time, cortisol just stays in your body as almost a constant. And that's going to start a cascade of problems that you might think are actually the main problem, but it was actually cortisol working in the background that was a result of a stress that you never resolved. So just to circle back again, usually we'll have phase 1 where we have acute stress, where you'll have high adrenaline, high cortisol. And because of that, you'll get high blood sugar and you'll get low insulin sensitivity because you want to keep glucose levels high in your blood so that you're ready to use that glucose for energy. So it's normal in the short term to have this kind of reaction happen. It's part of how your body works. It's all very normal so far. It's once we get into prolonged stress where cortisol dominates, we can start getting into problems with your reproductive and your thyroid hormones. So the main hormones that get affected is a precursor hormone to testosterone and estrogen. It's called DHEA. So when the cortisol stays high, DHEA drops, and that reduces your productive hormones. So that means it lowers your testosterone in men and in women, which then leads to lowered libido, muscle loss, and fatigue. So even if you're trying to do some gains in the gym, but you have high stress going on, you're not going to get the same muscle gains that you would normally because of the testosterone levels running a little lower in your blood. It can also lead to lower estrogen and progesterone in women, which can make irregular cycles. It can give you more PMS. It can give fertility issues and even a lot of mood swings. So another one is thyroid hormones are going to go down. So there's two different types of thyroid hormones. There's T3 and T4. T3 is the active version of thyroid hormone, and there's T4, which is the inactive version. Usually the thyroid will produce more T4 than T3, but T4 gets converted into T3. So the inactive gets converted to the active in other organs, like your liver, for example, and that will help make your metabolism run. So if there's a low level in general of T3 and T4 being produced by the thyroid, your metabolism is going to slow down quite a bit, and because you're trying to conserve energy for any kind of stress response. And also just keep in mind that the liver is one of the detoxifying organs of the digestion system. So if your digestive system is being suppressed and you rely on your liver to convert, you're already having some issues there with your metabolism, which could lead to low energy, fatigue, weight gain, feeling cold all the time. So why I mention all these different hormones is because this happened to me. I thought I had a thyroid issue because all my blood work came back with my thyroid not looking great. And even though I took the thyroid medication, I was still having trouble feeling good. And it was showing my T3 and T4 levels were not great. So my whole hormonal system was dysregulated through stress, and my thyroid was starting to shut down. So other changes that can happen is you can also get lowered serotonin and dopamine. So these are your feel-good hormones in your brain. So it can lead you to having more anxiety, depression, and it can also you can have less motivation in general. You might just take on an era of what's the point? And that's just all, the hormones that help give you that good reward response in your brain. So we need those. It also creates more blood sugar dysregulation. So you get more insulin resistance. It doesn't mean you're getting type 2 diabetes, but it could be that over time you will have risk to develop diabetes down the line. And it also increases fat storage and you get more energy crashes. Fat storage will usually show up more in the belly, and it'll be that nice little tire that I hear a lot of women speak that way, where they go, oh yeah, you hit 40 and you get a tire around your stomach. But part of that could actually be because of stress and having too much cortisol in the system long term. Once you get into a real chronic stress stage, we're at a risk of getting more into burnout and dysregulation. So you can actually get HPA axis dysfunction, and that's when the adrenal glands start becoming dysregulated and they start releasing cortisol in ineffective ways. The normal daily rhythm of cortisol is actually that it should be a little higher in the morning, and it should gradually decrease and go down and be low in the evening when it's time to go to sleep. But when you have dysregulated cortisol, you'll actually have it reversed. So you'll have low cortisol in the morning, which will make you want to have 4 cups of coffee in the morning, which I don't recommend. That's when you know you're really starting to have an issue. And you actually have high cortisol at night. And this is what we'll call people who are wired but tired. So again, I can put this back into my university days where I'd always say, I study best at night. So I was probably in a chronic stress loop, and I would pull all-nighters just because I felt so much more awake and efficient and driven at night. But that's because that's when my cortisol was running super high. It can also lead to just more lowering of your thyroid hormones. You might really get diagnosed with hypothyroidism. So your metabolism slows down further and you get more weight gain. You're starting to get really like the symptoms of hypothyroidism now. You get the cold intolerance, you get brain fog, and you might actually be driven to think you need to go get diagnosed for a thyroid issue. In some cases, it could be a thyroid issue, but I think it's important to keep in mind that sometimes it could be chronic stress that's then depleting your thyroid hormones. It also increases your insulin resistance. So your blood sugar remains unstable, and it makes your blood sugar spike for almost anything that you'll eat. So that really starts to increase your risk of diabetes. It also lowers your melatonin. So like we were saying before, if your cortisol remains high at night and you're wired and tired, your melatonin is not able to kick in to help make you sleepy. So it actually makes your sleep cycles more disrupted and it worsens your exhaustion. So other things that it actually can do is it'll increase your general inflammation in your body. So chronic stress leads to that persistent inflammation. So it makes, your joints more inflamed. It can give you more pain issues. Like sometimes I have people who come see me and they say they have all these random back pains and joint pains. And sometimes it could be that they have arthritis, but sometimes it's really just that they're chronically inflamed from chronic stress. And also, your immune function is down. As soon as you get exposed to any little virus, you get sick, you get frequent colds, you may get slow wound healing. And if you have any kind of autoimmune condition or a slight autoimmune condition, you can get flare-ups more easily when you're in chronic stress. So once you reach this chronic stage, you're really starting to get into full burnout mode. So you start getting really intense fatigue, weight gain, brain fog, anxiety, and your hormones are really starting to go all out of whack to the point where you may not know where to start, because you might see, for example, that your period is off. You're also gaining weight and you're low energy, and you don't know if you have an estrogen issue or if you have a thyroid issue. Or if you decide to wear a glucose monitor or get a blood test done and it shows that your blood glucose is out of range, you might think you're diabetic. And the thing is, you might be all of those things in that moment once chronic stress has really taken its toll. But until you get to the real source of the problem, which in what I'm describing for this case, it would be that you have to adjust your stress. And what's really funny is when I had my thyroid issue, or what I thought was a source of a thyroid issue, I was, coming out of many years of university studies on high stress, always in high performance mode, trying to get my perfect scores and perform well and get the good job, work in the good clinic. And my body really started to scream at me, because not only was I just stressed from studies, the methods I was using to manage my stress, which was high intensity working out, being a high performance athlete in my youth, I thought I had to work out hard. I was doing all these amazing circuits, and they were actually really awesome workouts, but they just really weren't the right workout for me in the phase I was in. So I was doing intense team sports, intense trainings. I was doing HIIT classes, and then I was not sleeping enough. I was studying nonstop and working in clinic as an intern. And then I just was completely starting to burn out. And I thought, this is my thyroid. I must have a thyroid issue. And I can totally understand how it can be so disheartening when you go to the doctor and you think you have it all figured out. And you go, hey, I have all the symptoms of hypothyroidism and I need thyroid medication, because you think that's going to help you. And when they just turn around and tell you, no, it's stress, he was absolutely right. And I wish I had listened to him back then. But I think the problem was I didn't understand then how it gets from one thing to another. So I remember being a little cheeky with him. And I said, it's not the stress that's the problem. I'm worried I don't have enough energy to get through my day to do the work that I've been building up for years to do. And that's when he gave me the medication, because I think he knew in my head it was set that I wasn't going to just go do stress management techniques. And I took the medication for many years. And did it help? Maybe to a certain level, but it didn't help for very long. And it's only once I started diving deeper that I realized that I actually was a chronically stressed person. But it's funny how we don't want to see what we don't want to see. So how do we start? One, identifying that this might be a possibility, that this is an issue for us. It's about really being honest with yourself. Do you feel run down? Do you feel exhausted all the time? Do you have any joy in your life right now with everything that you're doing? Do you feel like you have all the weight of the world on your shoulders? It's pretty heavy stuff. It's pretty heavy questions to ask yourself. And I wasn't able to answer those for myself for a very long time. And everyone's answer is going to be different. It could just be, oh no, I'm in a blitz right now and I got to get through it. Hey, we all got to hustle sometimes in life. I think that is a part of today's life, and there's definitely no judgment there. I just think we have to be careful of when we let this become our norm. So if this becomes your norm, if you feel like you're getting into all these burnt out, run down issues, I invite you to take a step back and see where you can start promoting more self-care, not just going for a little manicure with the girls for an afternoon and then you go back to how your life is. Something that you can really implement that will help you just feel more centered, feel more in control of your life, to feel more joy in your life, if that makes sense. So if this episode resonates with you, I think it'll be very interesting to open up a conversation about this. I have been thinking of starting a community, a free community, mind you, where we could have conversations about how to deal with signs of burnout and low energy, and how we can find different tactics together to find more joy in our lives, find what wellness means to us, find what an actual fulfilling life is, and not just living through our programs of what life should be. So if that resonates with you, I'm going to leave a link in the show notes to invite you to go on the wait list for our online community. So I will end here. And I invite you to take a moment for yourself today, just to really see if you feel like a lot of these chronic stress signs were resonating with you, if you find your sleep is getting more disturbed, you're gaining weight in ways that you didn't think you would be, you're just feeling like a lot of people say they're just running on adrenaline all the time. I would invite you to take a step back and see how can you implement things that just help you be more in the moment and more in tapping into your joy. And that answer is going to be different for everyone. But I think the first step in getting out of a stress loop is really becoming more aligned with ourselves and finding what really resonates for us in order to live our most happiest and fulfilling life. So on that note, I'll see you next week.
Thank you for being a part of today's episode of the Holistish podcast. Ready to take your wellness journey further? Visit Holistish, that's holistic with an SH at the end, .com, to access our latest resources and wellness tools designed to support your holistic health journey. For holistic health inspiration and a behind-the-scenes look at integrating traditional wisdom with modern wellness, join our growing community on Instagram at the.holistish. If today's episode resonated with you, subscribe so that you never miss out on our weekly episodes, and leave a quick review to help other wellness seekers find us. Until next time, stay curious, stay balanced, and keep exploring what works best for your unique body and mind. Your health journey matters, and I'll meet you right back here next week.